Let me start by actually picking up on something Ted showed us toward the end, but asking the question more seriously. Who are the people, actually? I mean, you kept showing us your own living space and office, which seemed to move around from house to house. I don't know whether that was because you wanted to try each house out or you were trying to keep one step ahead of the bank or whatever. But obviously, there are many other occupants. So who are the people and how do they differ from, let's say, the market for other kinds of housing in La Jolla, San Diego, and so forth?
Well, I think who the market is probably the most important thing we learned in our first failure. Trying to think, that people would come into a vacant room and partition it themselves as a typical middle market, was not right. And what we did learn is there was a market of young people, young single people. Oddly enough, when we would get couples to move into the go-homes, we would have fights in the kitchens. And again, I did live in all of these buildings. As we went along, you'd always want to move into the next one. Right. But the thing that was so liberating was that there is a market of like-minded people who like what architects like rather than what developers like. Even if it's 3 or 4 or 5% of the market, is enough for a small developer to build something. So I was curious how this would fit in with the panels, discussions, and stuff today. And the wonderful things we saw last night, and the housing for the poor and all, and I'm feeling like, oh, we're doing little houses for rich artists and musicians and young architects, but they are all completely broke, because if you're an artist, right, you don't have any money. So it was a nice kind of realization that there was a particular market big enough that you could build a building for.
Right. Vicente, how about you? What about in Valencia? Who is the market going to be there? I mean, you don't yet have anything, there's nothing complete yet, right? No. So you can't actually say who has moved in, but what is expected?
In fact, when we start to discuss about the sharing apartment, many people say, yeah, but who's going to live there? This is like, maybe the people will be not interested. In fact, we did some studies and some tests, and we discovered that someone at 18 years old, he's able to share everything, because he lives in his parents' house. So when he's 22, is still there, 25, then you start to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, then you still want to share, but not too much. And then in some moment you start to have a kid, and well, it depends. You
don't want to share the girlfriend or the boyfriend. You don't want to share the space. Right, okay.
No, but the truth is that I think that the generation that we have in front of us, they grow with some other rules. And then the rules that they are using some other kind of, let's say, capacities and ideas, and sharing music and sharing other things, those people will be able to live in some way that, in fact, they want. I would like to connect this with the idea, again, with cars, no? So there was not innovation about cars during 50 years because we thought that no one wanted new cars, no? All the cars are the same. All the, let's say, industrialization was based on the repetition because this is what we thought that the people wanted. In fact, we in general, we think that the people are more stupid than what they are. And that's why, again, because we don't have any special interest, we are not doing any special things. In Sociopolis, there were like 2,000 apartments ready to sold, and there were 15,000 people in a list in order to buy it. So that means that from, let's say, the population point of view, if you give more, I mean, for the, let's say, the same price, that this is something that you can absolutely do. You don't need to think that they are just consumers. They are someone, they are people, and they are somehow, in the moment that you sell a house and then you will be selling energy or everything, they will be your clients or your partners. It's not, they are just consumers, bye-bye, no?
Right. It's interesting, both of you are talking in terms of segments of the population that are more sophisticated, let's say, that may not have more money, but have a degree of sophistication that is greater, perhaps a better way to put it is a degree of sophistication that is greater than their financial wherewithal. More taste than money, more whatever, which is certainly not a new phenomenon. I'm very struck, Vicente, by something you said when you mentioned in your presentation the word Napster, which now has already receded into the past, but the idea is certainly very much with us. And I'm intrigued by, I mean, certainly in the newspaper business, everyone is now obsessed with the notion that there's an entire generation that has no interest whatsoever in physical pieces of paper and gets its information entirely elsewhere. I think you are trying to think about ways in which that same sensibility will translate into physical space, an actual space. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was young, I remember someone told me that someone invented the electrical car.
Yeah.
But the petrol business, they killed him.
Yeah.
And then that's why we don't have electrical cars. Yeah. But it already was there. And talking with some people, they say, yeah, I already heard that story, you know? So the question is that innovation is there, but it seems that our society is only able to innovate when we really need it. So that means that but sometimes happens some strange thing. For example, no one was asking about Google. Yeah. And some guys invented Google. Yeah. They changed the history of everything, but no one was asking for this. It's not like the electrical car that some people were asking about this. So the question is that, from my point of view, we are right now in a moment where many innovations can happen related with many things, the way we live. We don't live anymore in a city. We don't live anymore in metropolis. I mean, there are people in London, they come to drink to my neighborhood in Barcelona. Yeah. Why? Because it's very cheap to take a plane. They come here, they make pubs, they watch the television, Arsenal against Manchester, but they are British. Why? They think that my neighborhood is their neighborhood. So, no, that's the truth. It's not, I mean, there are some things that are happening that in fact we never plan. But this is like this. So the question is how we can think about some other kind of way of living, some other business, some other design, some other things that are answering to this new condition that in fact we didn't expect it. Right. That's the question. That's why we start to think about sharing spaces. That's why we start to think about orchards. And that's incredible that some years later, it seems that this is exactly what the people are trying to do. Right. Is making food in front of your house, and no one was asking about this. So from my point of view, we have been living some years very, very conservative, and we are promoting innovation into architecture, into the form of the buildings, into new technologies, because in fact we need it.
It seems to me both of you, of course, are talking about architecture that still emerges from the marketplace, even if it's not the typical marketplace. Here in New York, we tend to think of innovation as being so resisted by the commercial marketplace that where there is any, and there's not very much, it will come in projects such as what you saw last night, St. Andrews, you know, things that Common Ground does, other kinds of social service things rather than anything created by a developer. But nonetheless, even as I said that, I realized I think in some ways the most important innovation in housing in New York in the last generation, or 2 generations really, which has had nothing to do with the problems of the homeless or the poor, is loft living, and how that has actually made its way into the marketplace in a far broader way, and to some extent changed the nature of how we define housing units. I thought, Ted, a lot of what you showed us did have resemblance to what now, you know, trendy developers all over the country are calling loft apartments and so forth.
Yeah, we stopped using the word loft.
Because it's already been corrupted by the, by the
well,
marketplace.
it became a type. And
Yeah.
one of the interesting things is if you try to make possible shared housing, perhaps write an ordinance about it, what you're really going to do is take away the advantages of the loopholes. And I think it's really important to think of the wonder of that definition of family as being so elastic. Because without going to the neighborhood groups and without fighting years and years with interests who maybe don't understand what you're doing, it's much easier just to say we're building units. Everybody knows what it is, and then the professionals who are on your side will help you, move your project through the building department and through the community, and the bankers who understand what it is will be able to fund it. So innovation in that first project, I learned, was a big mistake in development. And in fact, what you needed to do was take advantage of the existing situation. I never thought as a young man that I would ever be in favor of the status quo. Yeah? But as I've learned to work with the existing ordinances and learn them, it's the best thing, because there's a million little games and tricks in every ordinance that allow a building to be very different than a normal building. And and again, I just think it's really tough to try to legislate something like an unusual family, or to say anything. Now, if the house is a loft, that's the same thing. It's an elastic measure, yeah.